Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 10, Text 5, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation: O Maharaj Parikshit, by some auspicious opportunity for the two boys, the great saint Devarshi Narad once appeared there by chance. Seeing them intoxicated with rolling eyes, he could understand their situation. We are, of course, reading from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavata Madhuryasa, the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, is sweetness. And that sweetness is most concentrated here in the 10th canto, which is synonymous with Krishna's face. Prabhupada said that one can hear the sound of Krishna's flute in the 10th canto, if we have ears to hear. But here in the 10th canto also we find some apparently very terrible incident, that the two young sons of Kuvera, they were enjoying themselves very happily, so they thought. And all of a sudden, in the middle of their enjoyment, they were cursed. Of course, in the end, everything turned out for the good. But at the present, when they were cursed, then they didn't think this was very good. They couldn't understand how this is the mercy of Narad. Their offense, according to the modern way of thinking, is not very severe. Or many people wouldn't consider it an offense at all. They're saying, well, that's very good what they were doing. Good luck to them. Enjoy yourself more. Have a good time. So, what is correct? Isn't that a good way of thinking? They're enjoying themselves, so we should encourage them.
Life is short. Life is short, so enjoy yourself.
I'm going to smash you in a few minutes. Okay. All right, I'll take your position. Life is meant for enjoyment, and we should enjoy while we can. So previously there were all these taboos in human society, that we should not do such things as frolicking in public, naked. But thanks to our great friend from a little bit south of here, Mr. Freud, Herr Freud, we now realize that this is only backward and foolish. So man was running naked, then he put on clothes, and thanks to Mr. Freud, again, we took them off. This is the modern way of thinking, based on modern scientific way of thinking. The Krishna conscious way of thinking is diametrically opposed. Science attempts to, or claims that they are presenting us with knowledge of reality. But reality is described in Shastra. Science, or the human way of thinking, is an ant's eye view of the universe. We are like little ants looking through our telescopes and saying, yes, we have understood. Everything came from nothing. There was nothing, then there was a big bang, and then there was me sitting here telling you about it. Shastra is a God-eyed view of the universe. That means he's looking down and he can see everything very clearly. And he made it all and he designed it all. And he's not only seeing from outside looking up, he's also looking from down, from right, from left, from all directions, and from the inside of everything as Paramatma also. Therefore it is very intelligent to accept the version of Shastra, the descriptions of reality. Now here we find that described in Shastra, how Narad Muni is not pleased to see these young men frolicking naked with young women in the Ganga. It is wrong to do so. Now again, according to the modern way of thinking, we may think, well, what's wrong with it? There's nothing really wrong. Not doing any harm to anyone. I mean, if you walk into a village and pull out a machine gun and shoot everyone, that's wrong. But if you're just enjoying yourself between consenting partners, then what's wrong? You're not doing any harm to anyone. Then why did Narad get so upset that he cursed them? Well, because actually they are doing great harm to themselves and to others. This we understand through Shastra. Because there are laws of karma, and according to God's view, which is executed as God's law or the law of the universe, such activities are sinful. They are sinful because they bind one very strongly in this material consciousness. Illicit sex is against the self-interest of the conditioned soul. His real self-interest is nate vidu swartakating hi Vishnam. They don't know, but their real self-interest is to find out Vishnu. And sense enjoyment goes against the whole principle of purification that helps us to find out Vishnu. Therefore, the Vedic literatures, they give codes of human behavior which are meant for, ultimately for elevation to Krishna consciousness. Most people are not interested in Krishna consciousness. But even for persons not interested in Krishna consciousness, there are basic rules which help them to, that they don't fall very deeply down into hellish life. So, for this reason, there are rules that proscribe illicit sex. You got that? Proscribe? Not proscribe. Proscribe means to ban it, yeah. Now, illicit sex, that may come in various forms, and more or less in modern life that is accepted. Yeah, it's okay. There's no concept of illicit sex. So to understand and implement these Shastric principles in our lives for our own self-interest, we have to understand the principles of Shastra. It seems that we're increasingly seeing among devotees an acceptance of Krishna consciousness in terms of modern or Western way of thinking. In other words, we'll live like normal people and we'll chant Hare Krishna. But normal people, according to the rating of this material world, don't chant Hare Krishna. According to the opinion or the standard of this material world. And to chant Hare Krishna, it means to adopt a whole different way of thinking. Chanting Hare Krishna means, oh Krishna, oh energy of Krishna, please engage me in your service. So there's a whole culture which goes to foster that attitude of serving Krishna. Whereas modern culture and the whole modern way of thinking is to foster the attitude of eat, sleep, drink, be merry and enjoy, for tomorrow we shall all be dead. So the modern way of thinking and the modern way of life is based on ignorance, and it leads to further ignorance. Whereas the Krishna conscious way of life is knowledge, it is reality, and it leads us to be fixed in our real position in the spiritual world with Krishna, taking part in these pastimes which are described here in the 10th canto. So if we don't adopt the Krishna conscious way of thinking, then it means that we're still following the demoniac way of thinking. Sure. Now this term demoniac may seem to be very extreme, because we see most people, they're just normal people, nice people. They're not really bad people. That may be also. But due to ignorance, we find most normal people, most nice people are committing grossly sinful activities. So we shouldn't think that because a person says, hello, how are you, good day, and waves at us, that means that he's a saintly person. Certain activities are very sinful. Meat eating, gambling, intoxication, illicit sex, these are all very sinful. But if we partake of the way of thinking that we were brought up with in this Western way of life, then we'll think, well, it's not so bad. And we should enjoy ourselves, not knowing that this sense enjoyment is sharira vidyajal. It's this senses. They are a network of ignorance. Body composed of mundane senses. And jara indriya tahe kal is the senses there. They lead us to death, repeated death. So this idea that, well, we should make some compromise with the Western way of life and thinking. It's a very dangerous idea, actually. Now, to some extent, that may be the Western way of life we have to compromise with. Of course, Prabhupada wanted us to have our own farm communities with our own culture and way of life. But Grihastha devotees are not in that situation. They have to live in this world. But they should be very careful not to be influenced by the way of thinking of this world. Because the way of thinking of this world leads us to hell. It blocks Krishna consciousness. Now I want to move this discussion now to a topical subject within this geographical area among devotees, which is maybe very sensitive and maybe painful for some to discuss publicly. But because it's such a vital subject, it should be discussed and understood very clearly. The topic is that of divorce, which is sinful, because it's not allowed in the Vedic literatures. And especially if a man marries a woman who's already married to someone else, there's no such thing actually, because you can't marry your mother. Matrivat paradareshu, when the wife of another man is to be considered as one's mother. Now if one marries his mother, I mean even that's not allowed yet in modern society. But that's actually what's going on if a man marries any woman who's not a kanya, who's not a virgin actually. That's what's going on. So it's very sinful. And it causes much disturbance in society, because by this the institution of family life is destroyed. The family, that is the institution within which children are supposed to be brought up for their elevation. But if divorce is going on, then there's no stable family. It may be said that, well, it might be better for my Krishna consciousness. It may be said like that. Because after all, my husband is a jerk. Or my wife's useless. So, actually I should have married that other devotee's wife. But it's never too late. So we may think that actually it's good for my Krishna consciousness. This partner is better for me. So he made a mistake, but never mind, we'll just reverse that now. So he may reason like that. But such reasoning is not sanctioned by the Vedic literatures. That is our ant's eye view compared to God's eye view, which is that there is no such thing as divorce. That a man is supposed to take, at the time of marriage, a man takes charge to protect and maintain the woman. And the woman, she takes the vow to serve the husband throughout life. Now, Shastra states that even if a man is very surly in his behavior, it means very irritable and bad-tempered and nasty, even if he's old, even if he's sick, or even if he's badly behaved, it is the wife's duty to serve him. Now this may seem, well, that's not very good for Krishna consciousness. And it may not be. But it's worse to reject that husband. If the spouse is not fixed properly in Krishna consciousness, particularly if the man is not fixed properly in Krishna consciousness, if the wife, it's her duty to go on serving him and try to help him come up. And there are several cases that I know of personally where women, by their patience and high sense of Krishna consciousness, have helped to lift up their husband, who was in a fallen state actually. So it is the duty of the wife to serve the husband, whatever, and the duty of the husband to maintain the wife. Actually, in Vedic culture, if the wife goes away, the husband can reject, but the wife cannot reject the husband. And although divorce is banned, in Vedic culture a man is allowed to marry more than one wife. That means he doesn't throw out the first wife or the second wife, he keeps and then he has to maintain subsequent wives also. But a woman is never allowed to marry more than one husband, except in the very rare cases there of Draupadi. Now, we may not understand all the intricacies of why this is so, but nevertheless it should be accepted because it is Shastra Vidhi, it is the rule given by Shastra. Lord Krishna, in his definition of the demons in Bhagavad-gita, states that one of the symptoms of the demons is that they don't follow Shastra. Ya Shastra Vidim Utsrija Vartate Kamakarataha Nasa Siddhim Avapnoti Nasukam Naparam Gatim. Krishna says that those who, out of their own whim, out of their own desire, they flout the rules of Shastra. They think, well, I know better, or what does it matter what Shastra says anyway? Okay. That's something out of date. Such persons, they cannot attain the perfection of life. They cannot attain happiness, neither in this life or any other life. And they cannot go back to Godhead. So, yeah, we may think, well, there's no divorce and all that. It's not practical in the modern age. We should be realistic. But Shastra is most realistic for every time, place and circumstance. There's another puffed up way of thinking that now, what a Shastra, that was for some primitive civilization in the past. Or another rascaldom that's sometimes propagated that, well, we'll accept these spiritual descriptions of Krishna in the Shastra, but all these rules and regulations, that's for an ancient society, and now we'll adjust it to modern society. But adjust to modern society means, what is modern society? Cats and dogs. Cats and dogs because they don't have any marriage. Ahara nidra bhayamaitanam cha samanyam etat pashubhya naranam. Humans and animals both eat, sleep, mate and defend. Dharmo hitesham adhiko vishesham dharmena hina pashubhya naranam. The difference between humans and animals is that humans have dharma, or religious regulation, for their eating, sleeping, mating and defending. So the human regulation for sex, which is not in animal life, is marriage. And marriage means according to scriptural regulations. And now they've redefined marriage, that you can divorce and then remarry, but there's no such thing. That is not marriage according to scriptural definition. That is cat and dog life, because that's what the cats and dogs do. They have one partner, then another partner, then another. They have no idea of any higher purpose of life. And if one partakes in this cat and dog life, then we won't get Krishna. We may think that we will adjust the Krishna conscious way of life to the modern way of life, or to the materialistic way of life. But that will simply result in sahajaism. If we say we'll chant Hare Krishna but there's some illicit sex, well, it's not so bad. Be reasonable. Then the next thing because no one likes to say I'm wrong, so then we'll invent some philosophy to say, well, actually it's right. And there are so many varieties of sahajiyas who have rationalized their indulgence in illicit sex life in the name of Krishna consciousness. But such persons are rejected by genuine devotees who know that if we are to be Krishna conscious, we have to follow the Shastra Vidhi given by Krishna. Krishna clearly warns that if we don't follow Shastra Vidhi, then we have to suffer. So, nasa siddhim, we don't attain perfection. We don't attain happiness. And we see that people who divorce, they don't attain happiness by doing so. They're thinking, oh, I don't like this situation, let's change it. Because they've measured happiness in terms of sense gratification, then they can never achieve happiness, because sense gratification is not happiness. Happiness means to serve Krishna. Serving Krishna means according to Krishna's rules, not according to our opinion of how Krishna should have made the rules. And na param gatim, Krishna clearly says we cannot attain the supreme destination. We cannot go back to Godhead by acting against Shastra. It's not possible. So we may go on with this nonsense, divorce, this, that, and make some show of being a devotee, but you're not going to go back to Godhead. It's a severe offense. So, unfortunately, what happens is that Someone does it. A devotee does it. They divorce and then, okay, it's done. And then others start to think, well, maybe I should do that too. I don't like my wife either. And that new bhaktin, I think she needs protecting. And in this way, the sinful syndrome develops. And the whole endeavor to preach Krishna consciousness is spoiled by the irresponsibility of these rascals. We're talking such high things, 10th canto of Bhagavatam, Krishna's flute, Madhurya, and we can't even act like civilized human beings. And who will take this seriously? Talking such high things and acting like cats and dogs, who will accept such hypocrisy? So this should be stopped. Of course, we don't have the legislative power to stop this. But it's up to the individuals who might be considering such a thing to consider very seriously. What is the result of their actions? A responsible person doesn't just think about, well, what I want for my own happiness in the immediate future. What is the effect on the whole society? That has to be considered. So we can talk about well-being, we should consider the individuals and this and that and so many things. So we can consider the individuals and their particular case and this and that and so many things and be sympathetic to their condition. But even having done that, the fact remains that divorce is against Shastra Vidhi. Therefore it should not be done under any circumstances. So it's the duty of individuals. They may think, well, I don't like this situation. We just have to adjust to it, that's all. Somehow or other we entered into this serious pact. We should take it seriously. We're not going to be in this body for very long. Now the materialist will take, well, we're not going to be here very long, so any impediments to our enjoyment should be thrown out, and whatever we have to do to enjoy, we should do. But one who sees with the eye of knowledge knows that there's no use to trying to adjust my material situation in so many ways. Whatever it is, it is. So let me go on and make the best use of a bad bargain and chant Hare Krishna. Get out of this stinking material world. Because once we deviate from the path of responsibility, then there's no end to it. That, well, okay, I'll divorce and marry again. And then again we find, 3 months later, well, isn't quite the right person. I still have to, okay, try someone else. And it goes on and on and on like this. So the whole thing is a disaster from beginning to end. All these wonderful things that Prabhupada came to give us, this Vedic culture which is meant for our elevation, that cannot be established if we break the basic principles of it. Just like you can't have Vedic culture with a slaughterhouse. You can't have Vedic culture teaching Darwin's theory. And we can't have Vedic culture with institutionalized illicit sex. It just won't happen. So please consider this very seriously. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Any question about this?
What is the cause that such things happen? Is it that the devotee just somehow loses his head, so to speak? Or
devotee loses his intelligence. What is the cause? Yeah. Due to bad association. Due to bad association means instead of reading the Bhagavatam, he's watching TV or absorbed in reading the newspaper, and these things are very dangerous. It's just an example, but it's very dangerous. You see, just to give an example, when we read the newspaper, we may read some report that in Iraq this is going on, that's going on, something else is going on. Now it may be just some report of some fighting or this and that. But implicit in every word that is written there is the worldview of the writer. Just like in Prabhupada's books, in everything we read, even if it's a description of the planetary systems, in every drop of ink, there's the pulse of Prabhupada. Surrender to Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's every akshara, every syllable is purifying. Whereas when we read the newspaper, in every word, in every letter, there's the undercurrent. Life is meant for enjoyment. Enjoy. Life is meant for enjoyment. Enjoy. So it's not that reading the newspaper is wholly forbidden. It may be read for some preaching purpose also. But that doesn't mean that it forms the bulk of our reading. Just incidentally we may see. Our food, our spiritual food is Bhagavad-gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a dangerous world we live in. Even without wanting to, just like if you walk past, you go in the, we were going to the, when I was driving here, we stopped in the petrol station to visit the latrine or toilet. And just going in the shop, we saw there's some naked woman magazine, right? I mean, you're not looking for it, but it's there. So it may be that the mind can become very disturbed just like that, and the thought of illicit sex may enter the mind. But it's the duty of the devotee to control his mind by higher intelligence that is received from Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. It is the duty of the devotee to keep himself strong by following the process of sadhana and to understand and accept these principles. For instance, no divorce. If we accept that, then it actually makes life much easier. Because if we're thinking, yeah, maybe we can divorce, then maybe we can fight like animals also. Because, if it gets too bad, then we'll just break the whole thing. But then if you accept the principle of no divorce, then somehow or other, husband and wife are just with each other. It's several times couples have approached me and told they want a divorce, and I've spoken to them like this, and they said, okay, we're not going to. And then they just, okay, we have to live with each other, and then somehow or other they go on. And they're much happier actually once they accept this principle. And a lot of this unsteadiness in family life also comes from the misconception that family life is meant for our enjoyment, sense enjoyment. Grihastha ashram, there's a license for sense enjoyment. But it's not the purpose of the Grihastha ashram. Just something that may be there. Purpose is to live a responsible life in Krishna consciousness. But if we think that sense gratification is the goal of life, then what do we care about Shastra Vidhi? If we think that my own enjoyment is the most important thing and Krishna consciousness is something that I do also, then that's not Krishna consciousness. And then again, that so-called Krishna consciousness becomes another kind of attempt at sense enjoyment. In other words, we perform so apparently Krishna conscious activities, but for our own pleasure and not for the pleasure of Krishna. That is again Sahajya. There's some other question, please.
Did the Vedas foretell that there will be all these facilities, modern facilities as there are in the 20th century, like computers and cars and all this?
Not, to the best of my knowledge, not specifically so. You won't find in the Vedic literature, as far as I know, directions on how to build a computer. But that the people in Kali Yuga, they will be concerned with yantra vidya, or knowledge of machines. That is there. And so many predictions about the degradation of human society. Svikara eva chodvahe, for instance, that just on the basis of mutual attraction, so-called marriage will be formed, not on the basis of responsibility. So we shouldn't think that, well, we should fulfill the Vedic injunctions by doing all sinful things, because it says in Kali Yuga there'll be sinful life, so we should follow that. That is not correct. Rather, we should follow the prediction that kalim sabhanjayanti arya gunagya sarabhagina, that yatra sankirtanan arya sarva swartho bhilabhyate, that in Kali Yuga, persons who are intelligent, they take to the process of Krishna Sankirtan, and in this way all their real needs are fulfilled. This we should follow. Anything from the ladies? Let's hear something from their side. Is that all right?
Okay, Mataji. Yeah. How can a wife achieve self-realization this time when she has so many duties? Is one thing, so many things to do, and then she should follow her husband. But sometimes he speaks some vague things and she cannot really understand.
Some what things? Vague.
Vague. that she cannot really understand, then how can she make progress in this way?
You can make progress by following the process of Krishna consciousness, according to the situation that we find ourselves in. There's no ideal situation in this material world. So we have to execute Krishna consciousness the best we can under whatever circumstances we're in. The best thing that a wife can do in that situation is to execute Krishna consciousness the best she can. And if she's sincere, Krishna will help. Prabhupada's sister was also his god sister. Prabhupada's father, who was a pure devotee, married her into a family of fish eaters. Why? I don't know. Prabhupada didn't explain that. It may be that it's difficult to find any other kind of family because in Bengal, most of the people are fish eaters. So she cooked fish and meat for him every day. And she had a separate cooking arrangement for herself and she'd offer it to her deity. She executed Krishna consciousness as well as she could in the circumstance. And she was a pure devotee of Krishna. She went through what could be considered a difficult life, but she always remained jolly in Krishna consciousness. And she passed her last days in this world in Mayapur at the ISKCON temple. She didn't neglect her Stri Dharma while executing the Param Dharma of Krishna consciousness. Even though it seemed that her Stri Dharma was an obstacle to her Param Dharma or Bhagavad Dharma, she still executed that, and by Krishna's arrangement, she went back to Godhead. And there are many such examples in the Vedic literature. We don't find any example of this flouting this Stri Dharma. Of course, the example is there of Mirabai, who Prabhupada in one purport says the celebrated devotee means celebrated means renowned. But actually we don't, in our sampradaya, we don't give much credence to Mirabai actually. So better adjust to the situation that we're in and go on like that with Krishna consciousness. Krishna will help us. But it's not that by breaking the rules of Shastra we can fulfill the purpose of Shastra. That may be on a very high level. But for us, we need to follow the rules of Shastra and make the adjustment in our lives by which we can be Krishna conscious. I personally know many cases nowadays all over the world of women who are Krishna conscious whose husbands aren't. So it definitely can be done.
Who go into another relationship with another man beside her husband, it's the same sin or karmic reaction as if having a relationship with the son.
Yeah, that I said. Yeah. Yeah, there are extreme karmic reactions for that.
In the traditional Indian culture, then such a thing happens. I suppose it happens also. The faith of these people and how socially it is resolved. Don't experience
that. Modern India now, they have adopted the Western way of thinking, but traditionally, if a high caste person does that, they lose their caste. They're rejected from the society. They have to go live with the Chandals, because that's Chandal Vyavaha. That's behavior of the Chandal. You can't remain as a Brahmana. You can't go on doing deity worship or any such thing. You can't live with them. You're rejected. In one book of Satsvarup Maharaj, he writes some fiction about someone who's in a village that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passes through on the way to South India. And it describes how one woman is saying how her husband, Brahmana, he was caught drinking alcohol. And she was, petitioning how he could again be allowed to worship the deity. At that time there's no question. He wouldn't even be allowed to remain living in the same community. He'd be out. So it was very strict. Now, it could be said that Prabhupada wasn't so strict because he wanted people to have the opportunity to go on engaging in Krishna consciousness, whatever. But the mercy of Prabhupada shouldn't be taken advantage of to spoil everything that he tried to give us by trying to join Krishna consciousness with sinful life. There's some other question? Yeah, let me take this one. Yeah.
And what about the situation that the husband is going to drink alcohol and coming back home, beating his wife and children and gambling and losing all the money in this gambling? Still the wife should not divorce?
There's no prescription for divorce in the Vedic literatures. You have to find some other way to deal with it. There was no divorce previously. So many bad things were going on, but people, they lived with it. I'll take your question afterwards.
If a devotee lady is engaged in some nursery school and she has to feed the children there with meat, can it also be taken that she's executing her street dharma and she has reactions for that, or are there reactions?
Well, it's a little bit off the subject. Well, generally you see the street dharma, they execute their activities at home. They don't go. There isn't any nursery school as such. If you feel constrained to work outside, which is actually, you see, women. The natural thing for women is to have children, and they have to look after them. But now they have nursery schools, so the women can go off to work and flirt with the boys at work while her children are at the nursery school. So anyway, if you feel constrained to work outside, it's better, if possible, to find something which is not involved in such directly sinful activities. You see, I've been speaking of general principles, how to apply them in each individual circumstance. That will require some detailed examination of the individual case. So the basic principle is there. How to apply it, that you have to consult with senior devotees. One thing about the husband coming home and beating the wife and this and that. Shastra also gives some direction on how women should behave to satisfy their husbands, which in the modern age, women, they don't like to do. They have to become very submissive and massage his feet at night when he's going to sleep and so many things. So, what often happens is the husband, if the wife is always arguing with him and fighting and doesn't do what he says, then he tends to become frustrated and he may become a drunkard and so many things. So, for happy family life, you can adopt this principle of submission to the husband, and he'll feel very satisfied. Again, we may think, well, that's too much. How come? But it's Shastric direction, and it worked for so many thousands of years. That's another big topic. I'll take one more question and finish here, because obviously this could go on all day. There are many questions. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot.
He's asking about the case that the wife leaves her body and whether the man is forced to take sannyas.
No. Okay, I'll take one more then. We'll leave it here. If anyone wants to discuss this more later this morning, you can maybe discuss in a more personal way, some personal things if you like. I can be available. Because, obviously it's something that is very important and very relevant, and I'm just seeing how it's making such a bad effect on our society, this allowing illicit sex and divorce and so many things. It's just a disaster. For those who read English, I have this book, Glimpses of Traditional Indian Life, which gives some idea of how to live like human beings, which in the Western countries it's a forgotten or a never-known art. Okay, so I'll finish there, and again, if anyone wants to see me later this morning to discuss this further,
Takže tady
You're welcome to
skončíme.
do so. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki